guys, it's Sheila here and welcome back to another episode of It's All in My Headset. I'm currently interviewing folks across the gaming industry, from the ones who make the games to the ones that play them. We are trying to raise awareness of mental health one level at a time. As one of the clinical board members, we are also partnered with Safe in Our World, which are a mental health charity with the mission to eliminate stigma of mental health in the gaming community. And they support gamers and industry members alike with practical tools, resources and training around lots of different themes of mental health, and you can find out more about them at safeinourworld.org. I am your host Sheila, senior therapist, nerd and gamer. I had the pleasure of meeting with Rob Pearson from PlayStation Access to talk about his journey with mental health and all things gaming, especially being so well known and so well loved as part of the PlayStation online community. Please enjoy today's episode and welcome Rob Pearson. Rob, thanks so much for coming and wanting to be a part of this. I'm honestly, I'm so excited. I spoke to a few friends before I did today's interview and they were like, oh my God, I love Rob, I watch him all the time. Like, yeah, you're really, like, honestly, in the gaming community, people really feel quite connected to you from your time on.
Yeah, it's always strange to hear, but always really nice to hear. And yeah, sometimes I'll be at when you're at events and stuff and people come up to you and they're like, oh, I really like watching that, or that video you made, like, resonated with me, or whatever it is they say. I don't think you ever really realize when you're just standing in front of a camera or live streaming that sometimes there are actual human beings watching you. Yeah, it's always really nice to hear that stuff.
I suppose it would be good to give context that the way in which we were introduced was amazing, because I was doing the live show at MCM and we had some issues with just, technical stuff, we'll say. My dear friend Lorna, who's now at Rocksteady, had said that you were an amazing contact in terms of mental health. You were really passionate about it. It was something like the conversation was something you really cared about. When did gaming change from a hobby to then being much more for you? And you can start with, like, from childhood. We could go as early as that, like, pick it up where you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was from the moment I first saw a video game, there was just something just happened in my brain and I became immediately obsessed. And I think maybe it was the fact that I didn't actually own a console of my own for quite a while. So I was going to my friends' houses for birthday parties and playing on their PlayStations or whatever console it is they had. And I was just captivated by video games so much that I would just be begging my parents for a console every Christmas and birthday. No one else in my family played video games. My parents weren't and still aren't gamers. My dad was always of the opinion that it would be something I grew out of by the time I was like a teenager. I can remember I went round to his house one weekend and he'd bought like a second-hand NES with the first Super Mario Bros on it, and that for me was like the greatest weekend ever. So going to my dad's house just became, it's video game time now. It was so good I couldn't tear myself away from them. And I've never really sort of looked to investigate why or delved into why, but more so than any other medium. I guess I was always quite interested I liked escaping into other worlds. I liked stories. I always liked hiding myself away with like a fantasy book when I was younger. So I was big into fantasy literature. My dad introduced me to Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. I used to really enjoy reading this series of books called the Red Wolf series. I don't know if you're aware of those.
No, I haven't.
I like children's fantasy books starring animals, basically. British woodland animals. I used to
love that.
I used to love those. So I guess it sort of carried on a trend from just wanting to escape somewhere, experience things, or be someone that I couldn't be in otherwise in the real world. And then I was introduced to games that have since become like huge favorites of mine throughout my life, Final Fantasy being like a big one for me. When I first started playing that as a kid, I very much treated it like I was playing through a fantasy novel. Video games nowadays are often compared to film more than any other medium, and they strive, many of them, to be realistic and cinematic and photorealistic. Whereas I do think that era, we're talking about the 90s now, with the JRPGs that I used to enjoy, it would all be text bubbles. There was no voice acting. The gameplay was inhibited by the technical limitations of the hardware at the time, so you didn't have these grand real-time cinematic combat structures. All of it was left very much to the imagination of the player quite a lot of the time. What do these characters sound like? What do these fighting moves actually look like if they weren't just these quite simplistic, primitive representations of what these moves could be that you're looking at here in this 32-bit video game, and so your mind would have to do so much of the work, like it would do when you're reading a novel. And that's what I really found engaging, and why I think Final Fantasy remains my favorite, my all-time favorite series to this day.
Do you find that your relationship then with gaming is still a form of escapism even now? I mean, because I guess you know when they say that like when you have a passion and then you turn it into a job, and sometimes that can really impact the way in which you connect with it. Do you find that that's happened at all? Because you live, breathe, and you work in the gaming industry. How do you find that?
I think it's certainly changed. Escapism as an adult is a lot different to experiencing escapism when you're a kid. I think, and again, there'll be a lot of things I say in this recording that are obviously not relevant to everybody. Everybody's going to have their own interpretations of these things. But for me, I found escapism much easier as a child to get lost in a world, whereas I find now it's much harder to hold my concentration, be it if I'm reading a novel or playing a game. Escapism is something I still really value, but don't tend to find the opportunity for as much as I used to when I was a child. To my regret, when a game does come along that manages to grab me, I do still tend to find myself able to, thankfully, go back into those or reach those sort of feelings and experiences that I had when I was a kid. So recently, Final Fantasy VII Revelation, Part 3 of the remake trilogy, was announced at Summer Game Fest, and I could feel myself getting that sort of childlike excitement about it. And when it comes out next year, that will be, my life will just pause for a month or two months.
I'm obsessed with that. We should normalize taking annual leave when a new game comes out and you just play it. I feel the same way about the new Fable, where I'm just like, I don't think you guys realize that I will be AFK for months. It's like, it's serious business.
Well, that's definitely the joy of it. And I think as an adult, there are other things you can add to it. With Rebirth, the previous Final Fantasy game, there was just so many people were playing it and so many people were talking about it. And I'm quite lucky that for my job, I'm surrounded by people who also like video games. And so it's quite easy for me to access other people who want to talk about these things with me. So there's also like a community aspect to it as well, which in some cases runs not in parallel with that childhood idea, certainly that I had, of escaping on my own into another world where no one could bother me. Now there's like a social element to it as well, which I do find very enjoyable, especially when it's something that I want to talk about, and if I find someone else who's also excited about it, then it's the best feeling. That's great. It's an amazing feeling.
The theme that you're kind of reflecting on there about this like inner child feeling is so important, and I guess it would be really, I would be super interested to talk about it. You can tell me if you wouldn't be, but competitive gaming, is that ever something that you really dove into, like in your personal time?
Competitive gaming,
like COD and really kind of high paced, maybe not escapism sort of games, but games that are like quite.
I tend to not be as attracted to that. I'm not a particularly competitive person, to be honest. I find it sometimes quite intimidating. As soon as someone else wants the win more than I do, they've already got the win.
I'm like, oh,
okay, cool. You take it. Like, that's fine. I'm not bothered. And I think it doesn't help that I'm not the most talented when it comes to multiplayer first-person shooters, for instance. They're not something I excel at. I have enjoyed playing them in the past, and I remember when Call of Duty Modern Warfare was still a thing. That's probably the best I ever got at a first-person shooter, and I used to quite enjoy playing that when I was at
Modern
university.
Warfare was the best one, so
that was great. There was Metal Gear Solid 3, which was actually the first online game I played. The online mode for that was fantastic, and I spent way too many hours when I should have been reading and studying and writing essays. Just playing Metal Gear Solid 3 online instead. So that was great. It never really replaced what I always felt was my core enjoyment when it came to video games, which has always been single player, story driven, narrative games that you can just really get lost in. And it's always been the story for me and the characters that have been the most important thing over anything. Like I just want to get lost in a good story. For me, that's what it's about.
I can think of games that I have played at very specific points in my life and remember the emotions and the feelings that were attached that time. do you have anything like that as well? I mean, you mentioned Final Fantasy, but is there any?
Yes, absolutely. There are a few games tick the box there for me, and I'm always someone who's fairly cautious when it comes to describing video games as having shaped the person I am. Or,
Okay.
and I understand that for some people, video games have been like these incredibly formative things in terms of their personality, and I guess there probably is little bits of that subconsciously that might have happened with me. But there are, having said that, a number of games that I've played, and it's like you said, it's the time that you play them and what they mean to you at that point in your life that really makes them resonate. And the first one that I always remember is the original Kingdom Hearts. If I played Kingdom Hearts for the first time now as a 39-year-old man, I probably would not have the same experience that I did when I first played it I must have been 15, 16 when I first played it. It was around about the time where I was finishing secondary school. I was going into college, and then Kingdom Hearts 2 came out as I left home and went to university. It's a coming of age story of this kid who dreams of leaving his home. He embarks on this amazing journey of self-discovery, and it's, a lot of tragic things happen along the way, but he gets his wish. He gets to leave his home. It's not the dream he thought it would be, and he's thrust into all of these different worlds. Obviously it's cartoony and it's Disneyified, and all of the relationships are very histrionic and very sort of find the light inside yourself, and all your friends are your power, and it's cheesy as hell.
But it was so you felt like a hero playing it as a kid. I felt like a hero, and it's quite interesting. I loved Kingdom Hearts very similarly, and I think maybe at that age when I was playing it, I was like, yeah, I wanna do that. I don't want to be in this room. I don't want to go to school. Like, I want to, it is just that idea of adventure and like whatever is out there that I feel like we tap into so much at those ages, that I feel like, just to go back to your earlier point, as an adult it's so hard to do that. But yeah, as you were saying, sorry, I got excited and I interrupted.
Also, it was just so much about change. Like that character Sora, he changes so much. He changes literally when he goes to each of the worlds. And I know this is probably just an artistic flourish. When he goes to, the world of the Little Mermaid, he grows a dolphin tail. Or when he goes to the world of whatever it is, he adopts the physical appearance.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Of the world that he goes to. And he has to adapt himself to fit in with the world around him, and every world he visits is a completely alien place to him, and so he has to change and adapt every time he goes to a new place. And come the end of the game, he's experienced all of these things, and he's grown as a human, and he's grown as a character. And you'll get these incredibly melodramatic speaches about friendship and all of that, but as a teenager I was just absolutely lapping this stuff up.
Of course you were.
This is the greatest thing I've ever experienced. I don't think it really matters either way whether that was ever the intention. I think all that matters is that's how I interpreted it, and the feelings I had around that were real enough for me. And so that's why Kingdom Hearts for me will always be something I really look back on fondly.
It's really nice to see that there is such connection there for you at times throughout periods of life that you can reflect on and be like, actually, this was something that was really special to me. When we last spoke, we actually dove a little bit into like healthy versus kind of maybe unhealthy gaming, and you made a really good point that this isn't necessarily something that's always brought up in the gaming industry, or at least maybe it's a conversation that's touched on, but people are very careful around it, which I totally understand why. But I think it's such an important thing, and I have so many thoughts. Could we kind of explore a bit more about that?
Please.
What are your thoughts around then, like, in your own opinion, when gaming has been quite healthy use the word healthy, but when it's been healthy for you, or when you actually maybe had reflections that it's not been so great?
And I think you're right that anyone who talks about this kind of stuff has a responsibility to talk delicately and carefully around it, because everything I'm talking about, I can only talk about my lived experience. So everyone else's experience is going to be completely different. And there have been occasions where I've played video games like Kingdom Hearts, where I feel like they really have been a companion to me in like a particularly turbulent time. So like leaving home for the first time. And there have been games I've played since that we might touch upon a bit later that have unexpectedly, I don't know if I would say they've helped me, but they've like offered a lens, or they've offered like a perspective on something in my life that I wasn't prepared for, but they have helped me maybe make sense of a thing, or at least provided an outlet for a certain emotion I didn't even know I was holding on to until I played a certain game. A good example is the game Rime. I don't know if you played the game Rime. It came out a few years ago. I was initially drawn to it just because I really liked the art style, and it was set on this beautiful sort of like paradise island, and the water graphics look great. And I'm a big sucker for water graphics. Anything with pretty water in it, I'm like, I'll play that. And it starts out like this really gentle puzzle game. You just play this boy, you play as this boy solving puzzles, moving through this environment. It's quite cute and twee and lovely. And then as the game goes on, you start piecing together what's happened in the game. And I won't spoil what happens at the end for anyone who hasn't played it yet, but there's like something happens at the end that I didn't see coming that just ruined me. The ending to that game absolutely ruined me. The chapters of the game are all structured around like certain, and they're even named this, so it's not like there's no two ways about it. The game is absolutely an exploration of grief. So the chapters are called things like anger and denial, and there's like all of the chapters are like different stages of grief. You're not playing through it feeling miserable, but it's not until you get to the end when you realize what the whole game's been about, and then it might hit you. What it did make me think about that game is like becoming a parent was the hardest thing I think I've done in my life so far, particularly like the first few years of parenthood. Like my daughter's 10 now, but what Rhyme did was make me think about all of the different stages of my daughter's life and how like that person doesn't exist anymore. So it's not like it's a weird, and I would describe it as a kind of grief. I'm not like an expert in grief. I have not experienced too much of it, fortunately, yet, but there is like a weird sense of, so for instance, I'll walk past the park that I used to take her to when she was 2 or 3 years old, and I was obviously like a 32-year-old man back then. So the difference between a 32-year-old man and a 39, nearly 40-year-old man isn't that great. I'm still pretty much the same person, but there's a massive difference between a 2-year-old and a 10-year-old, and like that 2-year-old just doesn't exist anymore. Like the person's gone. So I'll go past these swings and these seesaws and slides, I'll just remember, these memories will just come into my head, and I realize that those aren't things we'll ever experience anymore. And I'll say to her, oh, do you remember we used to play on? And sometimes she won't even remember being there, and I'm like, oh my god, how do you not? This still feels quite fresh to me. That's not as hard-hitting as what Rhyme is about, but Rhyme made me think about these things and made me realize, or just think about this in a way that I wouldn't have expected to think about it. And this is a weird sensation as a parent that I assume will only become more and more of a thing the older my daughter gets. As I say, she's 10 now. She's going to be a teenager soon. In no time at all, she'll be an adult. God knows what that's going to feel like then. But there is like a strange sort of longing that I feel sometimes for the person that she was 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and how that person just isn't around anymore. It's a weird feeling. And Rhyme sort of tapped into that for me. In a way, Rhyme was helpful for me there. But as you said earlier, that I do think for me there are also instances where I feel like some of the more troubling aspects of my personality are often triggered by the ways in which I can find myself playing video games. I'm hard on myself a lot of the time. Well, I imagine lots of people are, but constant feelings of, oh, you're not good enough at this, or you can't do that. And if I'm playing a video game and I'm repeatedly dying in it, gamer rage is a thing that I think quite a lot of people who've played video games will have experienced at some point or another. It's a very unique feeling of frustration, I think, that people who don't understand it can often, I think, oversimplify it and look down on it and say things to you like, oh, it's just a game, or grow up, stop being such a baby, like why you
and then that makes it even worse.
It makes it even worse. But like for me, gamer rage is always boils down to a massive frustration at myself. Sure. You weren't good enough to do that, boss. You couldn't do it. And these games are structured in a way quite often that you learn through this failure, and that's where a lot of people derive the satisfaction from when they play these games, like the Souls-like games. And I can't count how many times I've been told in the past, oh, that's why the games are so good, because once you do finally beat the boss, you get this overwhelming feeling of achievement, having overcome something that was originally really hard for you. But I don't get that when I play those games. I only get the frustration, the rage, and the you're not good enough bit. That's all I get. That's all I get. And I
even when you beat them, what happens when you beat them?
I just feel like a numbness, followed by an immediate dread of what the next boss is going to be. There's no celebration for me when it comes to those games.
Fair.
I regret it, because I know those games are critically lauded for a reason, and I'd love to be able to experience the joy of playing them, but I find them, I think I've got better as I've got older at realizing the kind of things in games that will trigger these behaviors in me, and I tend to be better now at sort of either steering clear of them or managing those emotions so that I don't allow them to affect me in the way that they did. Because when I was at university, I was, bad. I would just, I'd do bad things, be hitting myself in the face if I hadn't beaten a boss in Devil May Cry, to the point where I was literally making myself miserable. And it's not, that's me. That's not the video game. The thing with video games is they are so good sometimes at uncorking sort of maybe an emotion or a feeling that's been bottled up for so long, because the success or fail states of video games are often very obvious, whereas the success or fail states in life are often very less obvious. And so there might be things that you've been holding on to emotionally for years and years and years, and then even if you're not directly thinking about it, you'll experience something similar in a video game, something that's very black and white, very clear cut, why you have failed. And then for me, and that'll be why, like, if my mum was watching, she'll think the anger I'm displaying is so disproportionate to what I've played. And it's not because I'm angry I've died in a video game. It's angry that whatever else I've not been able to do in 10 years. I tend to find that for me, video games can go two ways. Like I can find them incredibly comforting and helpful and deep and interesting and immersive. But also, if I'm in the wrong mindset, there are certain games that I know that I shouldn't play, because they will just they will not help me.
No, I think you've made such an amazing roundup. I mean, firstly, I kind of want to revisit what you touched on with grief and what was the game called again? Was it
Rime? R-I-M-E.
Because I haven't heard of it, but I would love to play it because I'm a big advocate for grief, and I can tell you about that afterwards. But it's absolutely I think a misconception of grief or bereavement is it's only when you have lost someone, and actually grief, I know it was Dr. Teresa, but I can't remember her surname for the life of me, but I read her book about grief as a whole, and actually the first chapter is dispelling these misconceptions that grief is it's just so in everything that we do, and we just don't acknowledge it. So it's, as you said, watching your daughter grow up and these stages now that are no longer there, and the things that you used to do when she was younger, you're grieving that. I think it's really amazing and lovely that this game actually was able to just make you reflect on that. I talk about it quite openly on my pod, but I lost my dad about 2 years ago, and I played a lot of games about grief before then, and Red Dead Redemption 2 is one that comes to my mind, but even Fable 2, that's my favorite game of all time, and I played that so many times. And it wasn't until I then went through that experience and did replay those games again that it was just a whole entirely different lens. I think it's amazing, and I think we have such a luxury to be able to visit some of these emotions so safely through games. And to contrast with what you're saying, that actually sometimes there are emotions that we don't visit safely, and then those unhealthy emotions can come out in unhealthy ways. I mean, you know what I think about me as a teenager with crippling low self-esteem? I was playing games and very similarly I lost or couldn't do them or whatever. It's such a personal attack. It's I am such an idiot, I am such, and it's all of that is unearthed. And I think I briefly told you that I'm actually a massive Souls player now, but the first time I picked up a Souls game, it was exposure therapy. It was almost I had to expose myself to these these deaths and these beliefs about myself, because the first time I played Bloodborne, I almost cried, and I will be honest, it was Orphan of Kos just ruined my life and made me turn off my PlayStation for 2 weeks. I didn't come back. If I ever hear Orphan of Kos's cries, I will see the PTSD is real. But no, I totally hear you, and I think the unhealthy aspect of it is that maybe there's a bigger picture around mental health in which some of us, and also if I can mention men, and unfortunately the systemic issue that there is where men don't feel comfortable in sharing their emotions, and they don't feel comfortable 100%. In talking about their emotions. And I think it's quite interesting, and we reflect on the correlation of when we think about game rage, the stereotype would be a guy.
Well, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head there. I guess it is a little bit of a generalization, but also I think it is the truth. Men are worse at at expressing in general are worse or not as practiced as women are at expressing their emotions. I'm particularly bad at it. And there are certain things that trigger the release of emotions, video games being one of them. Another thing I enjoy doing quite a lot of the times, I'm a big football fan. I like going to watch my football team play quite often. And I find a football stadium is also it's like a place where you are allowed
let loose,
to show some emotion
let
for a little bit.
loose.
It's like a crucible of the outside world rules don't really matter in there. And that's why you get, I'm guilty of it, just screaming my head off at things in a football game. And it feels to me like it's socially acceptable for a man to be emotional in a football stadium.
That's such an interesting point. Yeah.
Versus and I feel like it's more, I would say it's less socially acceptable, but it's more understandable if a man is emotional, be it anger, if it is one dimensional as just being angry when playing a video game, for example. Like you can understand why. I think it is getting better. I think conversations that men have around mental health, and particularly I think in the video game community, the conversations that people have around mental health have become more prevalent, certainly over the last 5 years or so, I would say.
Sure.
And I don't really feel too much anxiety or pressure when it comes to being open about this stuff, purely because my experiences, whenever I have done so, have only been overwhelmingly positive or have only been met positively by the community. Like no one has ever said to me, "Oh my God, Rob, why are you talking about that, you big loser?" No one ever reacts like that. Everyone's always very supportive whenever you talk about, in my experience. I think things are improving. Probably slower than is ideal, but any progress is good progress in that regard, I think.
No, absolutely. And I think that brings us to your lived experiences of mental health. Obviously, please only talk about what you're comfortable with, but obviously when we spoke previously, you mentioned you've got lived experience of depression, and you've been quite open about this, which is kind of what you're alluding to in terms of the community kind of really connecting with you on that. Could you talk me through your lived experience of depression, or in a way that you're comfortable with?
I think absolutely I can. I think so I don't really know how long I have lived with depression. I suspect probably a fairly long time. I see a therapist now a couple of times a month. I'm on antidepressant medication, which I've been taking for over a year, which I found very helpful. And also things like going to the football, I found like a real sense of community and belonging in going to that, which I find really beneficial as well. It's one of those things, I guess there's no golden bullet for it. There's no cure for it. You can become better at managing it. And I think I have become better at managing it. But having said that, as with all of these things, there are higher points and there are much lower points. And sometimes I'll go through like a particularly low point, and it's up to me in those instances to use what I can, be that medication or therapy or surrounding myself with people or giving myself things to look forward to. I find like it's a big thing. I mentioned earlier that the whole parenthood thing was a particularly challenging thing for me, especially the first year of being a dad. That was horrible. And in fact, the thing I always say that often shocks people, and I don't mind being completely open and honest about it, is that I will just happily say the day my daughter was born was the worst day of my life. It was dreadful, like horrendous, like so ridiculously traumatic, and all I was doing was watching it happen. I remember just you expect to feel like there were the things I was expecting to feel, which were like, overwhelming love at first sight when your daughter is born, like all these amazing magical feelings. I felt none of them. All I felt when she was finally born was just relief that it was over. That's all I thought, was thank God that is over. And I didn't really care about anything else at that point. And I don't know whether that had any sort of impact on my bond with my daughter in the early years, but for the first year especially, it was very difficult. Like she only wanted to be held by mum. She wouldn't let anyone else hold her without crying. And there was one instance I remember where my wife was feeding her with the bottle, and we very slowly sort of passed her over to me.
Oh my God.
And
she know.
She was sort of like asleep, and I maybe lasted 30 seconds or so, and she opened her eyes and looked at who was feeding her, and she had an absolute meltdown. It was I laugh about it now, but I wasn't laughing at the time.
No, I can imagine.
She was like, "No, not you, not you." Another memory I have from it is when my sister-in-law got married and my wife was a bridesmaid for that. So basically all my job was look after Ella for the day. She was about 6 months old at this point, and we were staying in an Airbnb. I was in there on my own with Ella, and she was just crying. She was just crying and crying and crying. I resolved myself to the fact that she's just going to cry. Like, it's not going to do her any damage or harm. She's going to be fine. She's just going to cry for as long as she cries, and it takes as long as it takes. And I think she cried solidly for about 2.5 hours, like 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And she would start to fall asleep, and then she would sob, and the sob would wake her up again. She would see who was holding her, and she'd start crying all over again. Eventually she fell asleep. I got to the point in the day where my wife's bridesmaid duties were over, and I was able to hand her back, and I was like, my God, I can't believe I've got through that. But it took a long time, a really, really long time, for me to develop what I thought was an actual father-daughter bond with my daughter. I mean, she's hopefully not, she won't remember any of this, and like our bond, I hope at least now, our bond is amazing. Like, she plays football for like a local girls football team, and I'm one of the coaches on this football team now, and like, I love those moments we get to spend together. She's decided she likes football, so she occasionally comes to football matches with me.
And that's perfect.
And that's like that's like a dream dad scenario as far as I'm concerned, where she's like in the stands cheering and screaming and shouting. It's magical. It's great. I've finally got to a place where I'm like, I enjoy fatherhood now. Like, it's good. But for a long time, I just didn't at all.
I think it's really important that you reflect on that, though, because actually in my service, obviously, I talk to a lot of people and I assess them in terms of their mental health and their current situations. And I've actually spoken to a lot of dads who are struggling kind of with really similar stuff you're talking about as well. You know, maybe the expectations of what they thought was going to happen haven't happened. The feelings, you know, are confusing. I've heard traumatic births have happened, and that's like, you know, that's a whole thing that then they're trying to process. I mean, this is like real stuff. We do forget about the postnatal period with dads. We do. It's a whole kind of other side of it that we really need to uphold, to be honest.
My wife, similarly, I think, had to go through quite a lot of therapy as well, because for her, it was the flip side of it. She was having to carry all of the emotional burden of being the only person that Ella would tolerate being held by. So she was always having to be there. So it was a different kind of challenge there, for sure. I felt like completely useless, like I couldn't do anything. Like, all I could do would be things that would maybe make my wife's life easier while she looked after Ella. But really, when you're trying to be a dad and you can't do any of the things that you think you're supposed to be doing, it felt rubbish. It was a horrible.
It would really unearth a lot of that, wouldn't it? Because what we were talking about even earlier is that those beliefs about yourself that maybe you've carried from whatever experience years ago or childhood or whatever, but those beliefs will probably be reactivated again, won't they? And
for sure.
God, I can't do anything. And I'm, you know, all of that will come up.
Well, this is the thing. I'm not qualified to talk about depression in any actual, certainly not like you are, or all I can do is talk about my lived experience with it. It always seems for me to come down to having really always wrestling with beliefs about myself. And I always feel like I've got two voices in my head. Sometimes one voice is stronger, sometimes the other voice is stronger. But it doesn't take much for the very negative voice to cow the voice who wants to be heard quite a lot of the time. Right. And so often I'll find myself, I guess, suppressing myself or editing myself, and not really. I'm very bad at voicing what I want or what my opinion is. Very, very bad at it. Like I have like almost feels like a physical block sometimes, or like I'm very afraid of doing it quite a lot of the time, and I don't really know why. And so that often leads to periods of negative spirals where I always make it a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes, and it's my own brain doing it to me. I don't think the parenthood thing was the trigger for that. I think probably it as you know, I've been speaking to my therapist now for about 3 years about this kind of thing. She suspects it comes from much earlier on in life. I'm not too worried about uncovering the root cause of it so much as I am of learning how to be better at managing it, which I think I am doing on the whole. I think my general base level of mood is higher than it used to be as a result of the therapy and the medication, and finding things that I enjoy. That's sort of in a nutshell what my lived experience of it is. When you're in like a bad, and for me sometimes these periods can last months at a time. It's you know, it's just, you feel like you've just got nothing to you'll go home after a day at work, and quite often I'll just immediately go upstairs and lie down and go to bed, and all I want to do is, like, going to bed will become the highlight of my day. That's all I want to do. Is all I'll think
Gosh.
about when I get up is, I've got to get through to bedtime. Let's just get through to bedtime, and then at least then I'm in like this little cocoon of when no one else is there, and no one else, I don't have to do anything for anyone else, or no one else requires anything of me. No one else can see me or judge me in this little place here. I'm experienced enough at dealing with it now that I can catch myself doing it. But catching yourself doing it and actually having the strength to effectively combat it aren't the same thing. And sometimes the negative voice wins, but like, that's okay, right? Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen is I'll wake up the next morning and try again the next day. And often going to sleep, waking up, you usually feel like a little bit reset when you've woken up, or at least I find it to be that way anyway. But yeah, and what's sad for me is often in those instances, things I know I enjoy, like video games, I'll find it harder to enjoy them, which is again what creates like all those like negative spirals, where I know that sometimes I'll be like, like a game I've been really enjoyed recently is Mixtape. It's not a game that asks to be mastered. It's not a game that asks to be, it doesn't ask too much of you. It's like, hey, come and listen to some music and look at some cool visuals, and it'll make you laugh for a bit. And that's sometimes the perfect kind of game I need. Even that, I'm like, I just don't have sometimes don't feel like I have the energy to, and that's so low effort, that game. You're just vibing basically. Even that, sometimes I'm like, let's just go to bed. Let's just turn the TV off and just go to bed, which I know is bad and doesn't ultimately help. I am getting better at it though, I think. Which, on the whole, I'm on an upwards trajectory. And I do still get incredibly excited. Like when Final Fantasy VII Revelation trailer came out at Summer Game Fest, I was in a period where I was not doing very well then. And that trailer coming out was like a sunburst, like an absolute explosion of like, oh my God, I can't wait for that. When they were all jumping out the high wind, and like just how huge and green the world looked. I was like, oh my God, I love these characters. It's quite reassuring when you're like, oh, I can still feel excitement about something. That's good. So yeah, it was very much video games and Final Fantasy to the rescue there.
I mean, Rob, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing such an intimate kind of experience of depression as well. Again, I feel like it's something that's quite shied away upon, and the more that we talk about that, the more we can normalize it. I think so many people watching will take so much away from just hearing another person experiencing that. It's about the small wins. I mean, sure, you understand the cycle, and we all know about like the therapeutic cycle of all of it, and you can be like, yes, I know that I need to do this if I'm feeling this way, but the actual self-compassion really comes in when maybe you don't have a good day and you're still compassionate to yourself. The healing can really come from the compassion for yourself, even on the days that you do just turn off the TV and you go to bed, and then you say, well, okay, that maybe wasn't the best thing, and I know that I probably should do XYZ, so I'm just going to try again tomorrow, and I'm going to give it another shot. And it's almost like you can't, when you're going through healing and you're going to therapy or whatever it is, it's like you can't beat yourself up and punish yourself further when you're already doing the work. And I think it's really nice to hear that even on those days that you just sound like you have a bit more self-compassion.
I think the self-compassion thing is a thing that I've regularly struggled with as well. There are things that I know, and then there is the way that I act, and often those are two very different things. I know I should do these things: sleep well, drink water, eat healthily, exercise, etc. And then there's the way that I act, which is often in direct contradiction. Almost sometimes it feels belligerently and deliberately so. Like there's a part of me that almost revels in the battle, which is frustrating. Almost like I've got my own belligerent Soulsborne boss inside me that just won't go away. I don't really mind talking about it. I don't really feel any sort of particular pressure talking about it either. And in fact, I find personally it helps talking about these things, as many people will have no doubt said before. Speaking them aloud, often there's like a power in words spoken aloud, isn't there? Where you're like, as soon as you say something aloud, there's almost pin something down, or
name it and tame it. That's what we When was the moment that you decided to maybe get like therapeutic support and try medication? The reason why I'm bringing it up is actually I find that the first step, that is the hardest for a lot of people. I mean, they might identify that, okay, I feel like I might be depressed, or I feel like I'm anxious, but it's still, especially for men, it's really hard to take the first step and say I'm struggling. How was that experience for you?
There's a very particular problematic line of behavior. It made me realize I need to sort this out like now. About a year ago, I was in my worst state, and my therapist, who said, look, you should probably consider medication on top of this as well. So I just went to my GP and they prescribed me some medication, and it has been very helpful, for me.
Which I think is amazing that you were able to recognize that and be like, I need help. And it's, in my experience, so I've never had depression. I don't have depression, but I have severe OCD, and I've had severe OCD since I was a child, really. But I wasn't diagnosed until I was 16. And I was very fortunate because my mum was a nurse, and so she was able to recognize, like my child is, doing XYZ and it is slightly different. And I can recognize the fortune that I had, that my mum was the one that was like, okay, like, we need to go off and get an assessment, whereas like some people aren't in that environment and they don't have anyone around them to highlight that. But even when that first step is done, it's still the continuous work, isn't it? It's going back to therapy. It's being, understanding your triggers. I've been in therapy now for almost a year for my OCD. I love what you said about it's not always it's not the end goal. And I think no matter what therapy you're in, I think that's a really good attitude to have to in general, is like mental health. You should never just have an end goal. And even though, for example, I'll see clients for a certain amount of sessions, and that's like the prescription or whatever the NHS do, actually I'm always like, you can come back, you can have more. Like, it's not just one time that you do it and that's it. Actually, mental health is a continuous process, and it's something that you navigate and you get better at, and then maybe you get worse at again, and it's just this really non-linear thing. And I think once that's not accept that, but we start to highlight that, there's just less pressure that we have to be fixed and it has to be final.
I appreciate that it's quite a privileged thing for me to do, is to go and pay a private therapist. Not everyone's in a position where they're able to do that. I did see an NHS therapist probably about 6 or 7 years ago now for a 4-week course of cognitive behavioral therapy, which I found helpful, but also it was very practical. It was very much about try these actions, try and break the cycles of these behaviors by doing these things. And each session was half an hour long, so there was like a time pressure to it. And the therapist I saw, he was great, but there was always like a deadline to it. I don't know what it says about our society, where it's like, I could just speak to a friend about all this stuff I speak to my therapist about, but who do I have in my life who I feel that comfortable being that open? But my therapist knows the absolute worst of me, and is the only person in the world apart from myself who knows the absolute worst of me. And that's maybe that in and of itself is a problem. Like, why am I afraid that a family member or a friend would judge me overly harshly for revealing this? If my therapist said to me the other day, when maybe a few months ago now, I was feeling particularly sorry for myself. She's like, why are you being so? If one of your friends came and confessed to you now the things that you are revealing about yourself, how would you feel? Would you hate them? And I said, no, I'd feel sorry for them. And she's like, well, there you go then. Like, I think that's something that we are in danger of, despite the fact that we are having more open conversations about mental health. When it really comes to the crunch of it, when it really comes to the, okay, you want people to be actually open about mental health, well then here you go, here's the full lowdown of how bad my mental health has got, and here's the things I have done. What do you think about that? And I still think there's a stigma around that, or at least there feels like people are prepared to have conversations on a certain surface level that are, I mean, what I'm saying now is easy. It's really easy for me to sit here and say, oh, I live with depression, because I know everyone watching it is going to be like, oh, poor Rob. Oh, I hope you're okay, Rob. You got it, Rob. You're we're here for you. Yeah. If I actually sat here and said what what I have done and what I have experienced, I don't think the reaction would be the same. And maybe that's a mistake of mine, and maybe that's part of the problem or part of the stigma. But I do think there's a tendency to be a little bit too soft sometimes around these kind of conversations. And I do think people need to put their money where their mouth is when they say, come and speak to me, or you can speak to me. Actually be there to listen to people properly spill it, rather than just playing like some kind of surface level cheerleader to it. Like, it's so easy to like a tweet or to put a heart emoji on an Instagram post of someone being like, I'm feeling sad today. Like, there's more that we can be doing.
Yeah, I think the conversations around mental health aren't ugly enough. I think we'll get to a point, and I hope that we'll get to a point where conversations can really be raw. But you are right, like, I don't know, you just made me think of, my clients that will tell me their deepest, darkest, and have that space to do so, and maybe then they walk away and feel like they have to put the mask back on, and it's just a shame, isn't it? It's just a shame. And so when you have been open about your depression, as you have been, you said that you had a reaction from the community. Can you tell me about that? What's that been like?
Sometimes there'll be like videos that I make that talk about it, not explicitly, but a little bit, and like the response to those is always really positive. I don't think I've ever spoken about it as explicitly as this before, but whenever I have been open about it, be on social media or the panel that I did a few years back that Lorna spoke about, the response is only ever positive. Like, as I said before, I've never had any kind of negative feedback or response when being open about mental health. I guess what I was saying is I am still not at a place where I'm completely comfortable to really
lay it on the table,
lay out the full extent of it. Like, I have the feeling that it goes both ways. You've got people who are happy to talk about it to a certain level, and then on the flip side, though, you've got people who are happy to listen to it to a certain level, or to respond positively to it to a certain level. And I can't think of any particular examples right now, but I think you'll often see instances on social media where, people are encouraged to say this, that, or the other, or to be open about this, that, or the other. When you'll often and someone will and are shot down for whatever it is, and it's unhelpful that I can't think of specific examples right now. But I do think right at the tip of it, there still exists a stigma that needs to be overcome. But like I have received like amazing messages from people in the community before, and in particular when you get messages from people who say things like, or that video you made, or that thing you said helped me through a particular time in my life. Or even if it's not like specific, even if it's just a silly live stream or mucking about in a video, sometimes people will say, oh, I was going through a tough time, I was here, and that video just made me laugh. And that's important as well, right? Like, if you can be the one thing that makes someone laugh, that can be like mega important. Sometimes if I'm in a bad spell, I'll just be doom scrolling, I'll just come across a funny TikTok, and there's a little punch of laughter that just gives you a little tweak. And so that's always very humbling, I think, when you get messages from people like that, and you realize that, the stuff that you're doing, rather than just it being making throwaway videos about video games, sometimes it does have like a demonstrable positive impact on people's day, which is great. It's great to hear.
Yeah, massively. And I hear that there is an aspect of uncomfortability of talking about your experiences, just because, there is perceived stigma. But, even you coming on here just to talk to me about it, I'm so honoured, firstly, that you trust this space to do that. And I'm so grateful, because that's like one of the biggest things is that I want to start making more of a space where we are addressing that stigma and having the really difficult conversations that are really challenging and show aspects to us that we don't like to show. And you just made me reflect on how I suppose I even present to the world, or how I present to other people. When I'm living with my fiance, he sees the real me. He sees me on the days where my OCD is so bad that I can't get off the sofa, and that level of transparency is a luxury. You make such a good point that that's not what other people have. So I think if it's that this is a way in which individuals that are experiencing mental health difficulties are able to see transparency that they don't have in their life. I think it's so special, and I'm just so very grateful that you're wanting to be a part of this, because I think what you've spoken about today is just honestly, it's amazing in terms of your journey and what you've done and what you continue to do despite what you go through.
Well, thank you for saying it. It's been. Thank you for inviting me on. I didn't really know what to expect from the conversation, other than I'll just have to be as honest as I can with this kind of stuff. I don't know whether the word would be enjoy. It's like saying, I don't know if I could ever say I enjoy playing a Soulsborne game. But there's like
You've heard it here, guys. The podcast, it's a Souls.
the Soulsborne of podcasts. Yeah. But there is certainly a value in it. I think this it feels like to me like this is the most valuable podcast I've been on.
Oh, Bob, that's so kind.
So thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you so much. I will. You know what I'll do? My last question for you is actually about what kind of games are we in the need of, and I feel like it's a really good thing to end on and maybe round up on, of like, you know, maybe not even games, but like narratives, because you're so narrative driven. You're someone that really values escapism. Like, what sort of narratives do you think that we need more of at this time?
This is I was thinking about this because I saw you'd written this question down, and I wanted to have a really good answer to it. And I'm not sure that it's the responsibility of video games or video game creators to have to explicitly tackle these issues. Like, you get games occasionally, like a Rhyme, that comes along and is very specifically about grief, and it's tackling grief, and it has something to say about grief, and I think that's fantastic. A lot of the time, I think if video games do have a responsibility, I think it's just to, even if it's just for the half an hour that you're playing them, to take people, to offer that escapism, I guess, to offer it in a way that is as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. In terms of what kind of narratives do we need to explore more, I think it can be anything. Like I said with Kingdom Hearts earlier, I have no idea whether when they were making that game, they wanted to make a game that spoke to a teenage boy about how it was okay to adapt to the world when he went out into it for the first time. Or whether it was just, won't it be cool if Sora looks like he's from Halloween Town in the
dolphin fin.
We'll put a pumpkin on his face. That's funny, isn't it? That's probably all they were thinking, and that's fine. That's fine. And I think people will ultimately read into narratives and interpret them in ways that are relevant to their own experiences, regardless of what the intentions of the developers are. Really, I think what I would like to see from video games, what I'd like to see them continue to do, is just to offer escapism in new and creative ways. Like I mentioned Mixtape earlier, I like it so much because I'd never played anything like it before. I didn't feel like every scene surprised me. It made me laugh.
Good. I love that.
It made me laugh all the time, and I find that quite rare in video games now. A lot of video games are incredibly accomplished. They're very cinematic. They're very structured, and they know exactly what they're taking from each genre. They deliver these meticulous experiences that feel luxurious to play. But sometimes you want something that just makes you, like, oh my God, what was that? I didn't know that was going to happen. Just something a little bit different, something to shake people out of their apathy. Because I think what I really need when I'm in one of those lulls is not a game that, when I think about playing it, I'm like, oh, I just want something that I don't have to worry about being brilliant at, or, understanding some kind of massively deep thing. Sometimes I just want to...
Yeah, you just want to switch off.
I just want to look at some pretty colors and listen and hear some cool music. And, that's all I want. It's very basic, very, very basic stuff. I think the term video game is so outrageously broad as well. Like a video game can be something like a God of War that just looks like the most beautifully cinematic, incredible thing you've ever played. Or it can be something made by one person in their bedroom that has, retro-inspired visuals, and it lasts for 2 hours. And it doesn't matter that the gulf between the budgets and the narrative between those two things is that big, so long as the experience that you can get out of it as a player means something to you. I think I'm saying that quite clumsily. I don't know what it is I'm trying to land on, but there's like I don't think there's any sort of easy way to pin down what I think video games should be doing or tackling more of, other than continuing to offer as much creative escapism as they possibly can, in ways that continue to inspire and surprise players, because that's what I kind of want to see. And more Final Fantasy games, obviously.
More final, yeah.
Well.
No,
Yeah.
I think you're totally right, and I think you make a good point of, I think there's a time and a place. I love all of these new massive RPGs. I watched my fiance play some of the new Crimson Desert when it came out, and it was a whole thing, and I was, and I love all of that, and don't get me wrong, keep them coming. I always want a new RPG, but it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming when you're an adult and you have to adult. Just an element of like lightheartedness is also so important. And I actually do feel like a lot of the games that have come out, as amazing and fantastic and deep and Claire Obscure made me cry my eyes out, everything is really deep and quite emotionally investing. And I think sometimes that can be difficult. And when you have mental health difficulties, when I'm having a really bad OCD day, for example, I can't switch on a game that requires all of my emotional concentration because I just can't do it. So I totally get it, and I think that's a great answer.
I'm glad, because it's also a bit of a cop-out answer.
No,
just keep doing what you're doing, guys.
Just do it, guys. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. But no, seriously, Rob, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have anything else you feel like you wanted to share?
Anyone who's ever sent a message to me, either on Instagram DM or in the comments of the YouTube videos, who's said thanks for this video, or that has meant something. Like even if I'm bad at replying and I'm quite sullen, but I've read them all and they all meant something. So thank you. Video games they're not like a miracle golden bullet for anything, but they can be a very worthwhile, not just a hobby. They're more than a hobby.
Sure.
And they can be with you through tough times in your life. And I know that they have helped people through incredibly tough periods in their life, because people have told me about that. So just keep enjoying video games. Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much. I honestly, I'm honoured that you came on. So thank you for wanting to chat with me. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you so much for having me on.